Behind you to get on to and from the podium, but okay. They didn't leave us a lot of room here. I think I can do it.
So this is
the clicker. All right. Pretty straightforward. Arrows.
All right. Is Larry Reed still involved with the Institute?
Who's that?
Larry Reed.
Not directly. Doug.
Just wanted to say hi.
Hey, thank you for coming. Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. And yeah, it seems like you have some previous contacts with our panelists here. Thank you so much for coming.
He worked me like I owed him money.
My clock out. Okay, we're getting the high sign from the back. I don't get a lot of room up here.
You good? All right.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to our event. My name is Bendy Groh. I'm the Director of Education Policy at the Mackinac Center. So we're glad to have you at today's Issues and Ideas Forum. And so thankful you all could join us today. It looks like we have pretty close to a full house. For many of you, this is probably maybe your first time at the Mackinac Center. I see, but I've also encountered a lot of familiar faces. For those of you who are less familiar with us, by way of background, the Mackinac Center for Public Policy is a nonprofit institute. It advances the principles of free markets and individual freedom and limited government. Through our research and education programs, we challenge government overreach and advocate for free market approaches to public policy. And since 1987, we've been a champion for freedom for the residents of Michigan and beyond. Mackinac Center publishes independent academic quality research with a focus on the areas of criminal justice, education, of course, as we could talk about today, energy, environment, state and local finances, and worker freedom. We also house a legal foundation that uses strategic litigation and public outreach to help secure the liberties of Michigan's residents, workers, students, and entrepreneurs. You can find our research publications and some of information on our work on the table there against the far wall. You can also visit our website, mackinac.org. So now on today's program, are there better options for underperforming schools? Recent months brought news out of Benton Harbor in Michigan's southwest corner. State officials sought to advance dramatic changes for the low-income urban school district plagued by financial and academic troubles. Only 5% of the district's third graders can read at grade level. It's been more than 5 years since even one of the 11th graders in the Benton Harbor School District has left ready to do college-level math. Today, there are fewer school-aged children living in the Benton Harbor community, and fewer of those who are remaining behind are attending the Benton Harbor School District, as many of their peers are exercising schools of choice to attend nearby higher-performing districts. Among the solutions proposed by the governor and the state treasurer's office were to solve the fiscal and academic difficulties of the district were to close down the high school. You probably read about this in the newspaper. Pushback from the local school board and many in the community has left the district's path forward unresolved and uncertain these many months later. While the situation may play out differently in Benton Harbor than other places, it's certainly not the first time in recent memory that a low-performing Michigan district has faced drastic intervention from the state. Detroit has gone through 2 stints. Highland Park and Muskegon Heights were converted into charter-managed systems. Districts like Inkster and Buena Vista closed up shop. It's not uncommon for underperforming charter schools to be closed down by their authorizers, not so much the case with what we see in conventional districts. In recent years, we've seen the State School Reform Office, we've seen the Education Achievement Authority come and go. And just this month, we received the first report from the Michigan Department of Education on its 2017 partnership agreements with struggling schools and districts. As expected, it's too early to draw widespread conclusions of how those partnerships are working, but the report did find, quote, modest but potentially positive results from the first set of partnerships, while also observing that, quote, reforms are still largely occurring on the margin. The broader track record of school turnarounds does not lead to great optimism. A review of the U.S. Department of Education's Obama-era school improvement grants showed $7 billion spent with no results. But there were also hopeful examples, like one recently featured from Camden, New Jersey, where a state-led reform raised many achievement indicators and cut the dropout rates in half. Can Michigan match or exceed the results seen in places like Camden? That's what we want to talk about today. This raises some questions for our speakers and for all of us. What options should Michigan have when schools chronically fail to serve their students? What policies hold the promise of supporting effective turnaround efforts? And what barriers stand in the way that the state can remove or modify to free the hands who are doing the important work? Finally, what different educational approaches might appeal to families and leaders in troubled communities? Approaches that hold standards and expectations high while delivering real help to some of our state's most at-risk students. The format of today's event is we'll have our speakers make their presentations, and then I will moderate a question and answer period. You should be able to find note cards in the center of your tables. If you have a question for either or both of our speakers you'd like to address to them, please write it down on the note card, and one of my colleagues here at the Mackinac Center will be around to take that from you. And then I will do my best to pose as many of those questions as possible during the Q&A period. But now on to our first speaker. Our first presentation will come from Dr. Donald Weatherspoon. Dr. Weatherspoon has brought his extensive experience in educational administration and state government to help direct interventions in numerous troubled Michigan school districts. A 1967 graduate of Michigan State University, he also holds advanced degrees from Eastern Michigan and the University of Michigan, a Michigan trifecta, one might say. His professional experience includes leadership roles in the Michigan Department of Commerce, Department of Natural Resources, and the Department of Corrections. But more pertinent to our topic at hand, Dr. Weatherspoon has also served as Assistant Superintendent at the Michigan Department of Education, Emergency Manager in both Highland Park and Muskegon Heights, and in various formal roles as a consultant with Pontiac and Benton Harbor schools. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Donald Weatherspoon.
Good afternoon. Well, thank you, Ben, for that introduction. I'm glad my mother's not here to hear it because she said, boy, can't you ever keep a job? I also want to thank a few people in the audience, some of whom are responsible for my being here. One of them is Doug Ross, who worked me like I owed him money when he was the director of the Department of Commerce. The other is Jim Gunner, excuse me, who helped me shape some approaches to school districts that had failed to the point where I could not find a viable way to reopen it. And the community said, we want a school. So I also want to thank Dr. Wanda Cook Robinson for being here, because back when I was in the Department of Education, she and I worked on Buena Vista, which the board was so recalcitrant, decided that they'd rather go out of existence than to listen to reasonableness. And then I see Mike Williamson, who is one of the best arguers I've ever seen in life, because when we worked together in the Department of Education, he would always come up with some philosophical approach that I'd disagree with, and he'd win because he had more money. Nice to see you, Mike. And Justin King, former MASB, he was gracious enough to allow me to work with one of his staff to talk about school districts that needed to look at their financial positions before they went, quote, belly up. And I knew that was, quote, risky for Justin at the time, because his board wasn't really tuned in to understanding what was happening in these districts where change was occurring so rapidly that they couldn't keep up with it. So what I'm going to talk about today is very, very simple. I'm not going to talk about any specific school district, but a combination of things that have happened through my experience. And we're going to talk about money, we're going to talk about personnel, we're going to talk about lawsuits, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. But I'm going to do it through the lens of a child. That'll keep it politically correct. And anything that I say did happen, but I'm not going to attribute it to a school district, because some of it is so outlandish, you would walk out here and saying, where did he make that up? Or was he smoking something when he conjured up this idea? So we're going to have 3 students here, and she's being anointed right now, and here, he's being anointed. These are urban school kids, okay? This one is the affluent school district. Notice the distinguished look that he has. He's been successful, etc. All right, so let's say that they're kindergartners, and they're getting ready to start school in an urban district and a rural affluent district. What, as a child, can we walk into? So let's talk about him. We're going to say, okay, Gary, we're going to get you through this school district in 12 years, and we're going to give you a 10-speed bike. And all you have to do is drive around this building 12 times, and you'll accumulate enough credits to graduate. We're clear on that? So, and we have the money to back you up. So, Gary's got some money here. And let me tell you what the money is made up of. He's got $1 per year for state aid. Okay? He's got $3 for fund equity. He's got a rainy day fund, so in case a building or whatever else goes up. All right, Gary's he's flush. Jennifer and Jim get to ride a tricycle with rusty axles and bent wheels. So Jennifer starts out with $10. Now Gary's got 12. Why does Jennifer have $10? Okay, children who are in urban school districts, if they have 2 or more risk factors, are 2 years behind by the time they're in 3rd grade. So Jennifer has a stack of $10 right there in quarters. Jennifer has no fund equity. Sorry, Jennifer. Sorry, Jim. And Jennifer has, she's in a district that has a deficit. And let's say that deficit is at, let's say, 3% of their general fund. So Jennifer, please remove at least $1 from your 10. All right? Now Jennifer owes long-term debt that will be paid off when her grandchildren hit middle school. So by 2040 something, the debt will be paid off. We don't have any money because we don't know what's going to come in. And in that school district, they have the non-homestead tax at its maximum for 16 years. So we got something coming in. And I will say this. When I say non-homestead tax, that's not taxed on the property owner. It's taxed on businesses and landlords. If everything stays the same, you can expect the projection of income coming in from that non-homestead tax to pay off the debt in 18 years. If there's a 0.5% change downward in that income, you double the length of time that debt's going to be repaid. Now, these are just follow my assumptions. If you have an uptick of a 0.5%, you pay it off in half the time. So, we hope that Jennifer and Jim have a willing community that's willing to vote money out of their taxes or put a tax on somebody else because they may or may not own their home to keep that revenue coming in. Meantime, we put them in school. Now remember this tricycle they have? And we say, go. Gary's off to the races. He's at grade level. And Gary now has a cadre of teachers who welcome him to every lap of the race. Jennifer and Jim have every supplemental program that you can think of to help his teachers and her teachers help them as students. So we got Title I categorical aids, 31A money, which is like school safety money, whatever. Now, what happens? So let's go to, open your thing there, Jennifer. Let's go to enrollment. So if you, in your handout, you don't, and please don't look at this because I want you to follow me and not the handout. I was talking to Jennifer here. Jennifer and Jim are seeing a minimum of 5% reduction in their school enrollment per year. So by the time they're in the 5th grade, all their little friends may be gone, or half of them, I'm so sorry. When we would look at this, we say, okay, I've got debt, I've got deficit, I've got teachers. Now, Gary has a full complement. Here, I may see 50% of my teachers 50% of the time. I may see 50% of my classmates come to school regularly. And now is a little time, I'm going to digress for just a second. Because absenteeism is such a big factor in these schools, you kick in other agencies. And the agency, in terms of human services, has a law that says, if you don't go to school, if you list, and let's use a number, 10%, we get to take your financial aid in terms of public service. So we hire an attendance officer, probably paid for by either the sheriff's department or the Department of Social Services, whatever, to go monitor and collect Jim because he didn't come to school. Okay? Now, what does the school district do to encourage Jim to come to school on time? Well, they might offer him a couple meals, like apples and oranges and whatever. So Jim might be encouraged to come to school to eat breakfast regularly. And all that comes out of a grant. So Jennifer's and Jim's school are working hard to maintain the grant, all right? But we're still dropping enrollment. Meantime, let's turn the page. We look at the ability of the school to function. All right, remember I said Gary had $3 fund equity on that $12, right? Jennifer has 0. Okay? So Jennifer, remove another $1 from your list here. All right. When I have teachers in a school district, the instructional part is 90% of my budget, between 85 and 90%. Would you agree to that? All right. If I'm losing 50% of those teachers due to absenteeism, okay, that means I got to hire subs. There's no money in that budget, extra money in the budget, to pay the contracted costs for my teachers and now the additional costs for my subs. So when I come to school as a child, I look up and her face has changed. Non-certified. Doesn't even have a lesson plan. And that brings up the question of, well, if there was a lesson plan, what would it look like? Well, I'll just pick on a thing called Carnegie Math, just for the sake of discussion. It's a good program. Gary has it in his school, and he is just blossoming in terms of being ready for STEM. Jennifer never heard of it. In fact, Jim found the book that his daddy used 30 years before, the math book that they were using in school. So let's get Jim and Jennifer through 4 laps or 5 laps. He's on lap 8. So now he says, to hell with this, I'm going to do school of choice. So you get to move over to Gary's. How much time do I have? All right, so I got to speed this up. So now, goodbye, $5 more. Okay? All right. What does Jennifer's school district have to operate with? Now, this is where it gets really interesting for a lot of these kids. Have a change of administration. So in the most I've seen is like 5 superintendents in 8 years, with a payout for each superintendent. All right? I also have seen the roof of several buildings blow off, and they weren't insured. So we got to take Jennifer down to about a couple dollars here. So we're looking at wage concessions from the staff so we can keep the buildings open and keep the kids coming. And take out a couple more of your dollars here, your rolls. So we go to the state and we say, hey, I got to have some money to operate. So we borrow the same amount of money, hypothetically, of course, that is our budget, $12. Okay? Okay. Now, I've got half the students, basically same staff, same old buildings. Oh, no, I forgot to tell you. 60% of our buildings are vacant and over 50 years old. So, Jennifer, why don't you just give up another $4? Okay? And she's already complaining. She says, how many do you think I have to give up? Well, that's what Jennifer's teachers and administrators are saying. But now let's get to the juicy part. Why am I holding on to the empty buildings? Well, pride, delusions of glory, or maybe the Nile River has been renamed to denial. I don't know. How do these people get into positions of authority running the school districts? Well, 200 votes in most of the districts that I'm aware of will get you elected to the school board. Maximum 400 that I've seen. In fact, I will tell you one of the tricks that I saw a guy use who was not an 8th grade graduate. He was president of a board. He carried a briefcase all the time. And one day I said, Mr. President, why are you carrying that briefcase? And he said, absentee ballots. He knew how to go to the nursing homes to get the vote and he brought his cadre with him. They controlled it. Since my time is limited, I want to say a couple things else about crazy boards. When I say crazy boards, I mean friends and family plans. Now, if you don't know what friends and family plan is, we can talk outside. But that means my best friend, my buddy, my girlfriend's best friend, my boyfriend's best friend, my cousin, etc., get a job. They could be athletic directors, they could be principals, or whatever. Then each of them get a hustle. As a matter of fact, my wife told me not to say this story, but I'll tell you this story. I'm an administrator in Jennifer School District. I go to the board and say, hey, I want a loan. Give me $55,000. And Doug would say, what for? Well, my mother's sick. Doug said, you got to be crazy. The board says, okay, here's $55,000. Now, when did boards of education become lending institutions or revolving loan funds for board members? That came out of the general fund. Give up a couple more dollars. And, as a board member, I think I want to run a hustle, so I'm going to lease or rent school facilities for my games and charge admission. No, I don't cover any insurance, etc. That's what happens. Now, let me move quickly to the teachers. The legacy costs, that operating cost that I've talked about, is so high because those contracts are so convoluted. You inherit, Jennifer, and used to be Jim, school district has legacy costs, meaning insurance, contracts, etc., that when the person retires, the payout is unbelievable. So when the train really crashed and the state comes in and said, we'll lend you the money to pay off those contracts, added to the debt. Yes, and give up another dollar to pay back those contracts, those legacy costs. And then, oh yes, I think I'll be sick. So as a teacher, I will take all of my sick time. So my substitute teacher costs go way up. And in one school district that had 1,400 kids in it, from January through June, they spent $1.2 million in sub-costs. That school district used to have 3,000 kids in it. Okay? Now let's talk about academic performance. So, Gary, I told you, was taught how to ride that bike, the 10-speed bike. He was taught how to take breaks. He was taught how to maintain mental toughness, etc. And every time he saw a little pothole in the sidewalk, etc., he knew how to avoid it. Now, this 3-wheeled tricycle with bent rims and rusty spokes hit a pothole, and boom, had a delay for a couple years, which means she's 2 years behind before she started school. Now she is 5 years behind by the time she's in 5th grade, 6th grade, all right? So we're going to have an infusion of new money. Let's say we're going to have a reading program and math programs, et cetera, to bring Jennifer right up to speed. Well, at best, 1.5 year gain per child. You never get that child to 12th grade by the end of the 12th year. They'll never be at grade. So I ask you this, and I'm going to close with this. When you look on page 16, if I remember correctly, and you look at that cluster of schools at the bottom, you say to yourself, how did it get here? Well, one of them is the kid was never, ever in a competitive position to achieve. So you can't blame the kid. Number two, if the crazy board wasn't so busy lending money, stealing money, or holding on to old buildings and other kinds of crazy things, maybe they would have adjusted to the loss of students and held on to their staff and made sure the staff received adequate training, etc., to be able to help these kids achieve. Because the kids don't come to school dumb. They have to be given the opportunity to rely on the adults. Doesn't matter who you are, but the adult has to be responsible for that child. So, if my academic goal, looking at page 16 at the bottom, you see those cluster of schools. Those schools that are my example here, you see where they stand, but that cluster down there at the lower right-hand corner are small rural school districts and some academies. So what is wrong with this picture? And that is, it goes back to the question of what is the availability of the teachers and what are we doing to support them? Two, are we really going to continue to support and sustain failure? Because you knew back when they started with that race, she was going to be 2 years behind. When she's halfway through the race, she's still way behind. Any incentive you provide to them at 1.5 years gain still won't get them to the point where they're at the median of how they're performing. So the question to you is this: when do you want to pay the final bill? Those communities are going to pay those bills out in the 2040, for sure. But the state guarantees the money for those loans. So one way or another, we all are going to pay. And by the way, Jim may or may not go to prison, okay? And when I said may or may not go to prison, if he does go to prison, you have continued paying for that child from the day they started school, because they're already in social services some kind of way. When they became juveniles, they got into the juvenile system, and then they went from juvenile time to adult time. And like I said, that's a 70% chance, a risk of going to prison. I don't know about you, but when the train wreck occurred, and I'm sorry that it occurred, if we don't take the perspective of the child, which I covered very hastily, I'm sorry we weren't able to do that better, you have invested in failure, loss, no economic growth, and a system that's going to continue to consume you because of emotion, political threats, and empty results. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weatherspoon. I encourage you to fill out those question cards or anything you can find at your table to write a question on. Taylor out here, wave, she's collecting those. So having heard some crucial insights and colorful illustrations rooted in some on-the-ground experience working in some troubled districts in Michigan, we move now to someone who has worked to develop an innovative and promising educational model that is serving at-risk students in other states, including one of our neighboring states. Our second speaker today is Mr. Kevin Teasley, president and founder of the Greater Educational Opportunities Foundation, a nonprofit educational organization headquartered in Indianapolis. The GEO Foundation was founded in 1998 and currently manages and supports charter schools in Gary, Indiana, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Teasley is co-founder and former president of the American Education Reform Foundation and Council, and former vice president of the Los Angeles-based Center for the Study of Popular Culture. He has public policy experience. There's hope for those of us in the public policy world to make an impact. He's worked at the Reason Foundation, the Heritage Foundation, and in the Reagan White House. Mr. Teasley is a graduate of Indiana University with a double major in political science and journalism. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Kevin Teasley.
Well, thank you. It's great to be back in Michigan. I grew up in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. and wasn't quite sure if I'd know anybody when I walked in the room, but it was like old home week. I see JC back in the back, JC Heisinger, Jim Gunner, and Doug Ross, and I have met years back. And then this guy over here, Bruce Walker, I graduated with your sister. Well, that's pretty neat. So, and Ben and I met when Ben was out in Colorado. So it's nice to be back in Michigan. I drove up this morning from Indianapolis. Dr. Weatherspoon's presentation painted a pretty dreary picture, frankly. I hope I'm not overstepping by saying that. It's unfortunate the way the system, not just in Michigan, but in any state, is operating. What he described happens at the school board, doesn't just happen here in Michigan, it happens everywhere. Fortunately, I don't have to deal with that. But GEO Foundation is a nonprofit, and we're a big supporter of school choice. I cut my teeth basically pushing for vouchers back in Los Angeles, California in 1992, and moved to Indiana. My wife and I wanted to raise a family. You don't want to necessarily do that in LA unless you can really afford it. But I will tell you, when I lived in DC, I worked on the Reagan administration, I lived on Capitol Hill and noticed the public schools that were in my neighborhood. They didn't look a thing like Mount Pleasant High School or Fancher Elementary or West Side Middle School in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Those are pretty nice schools, frankly. In DC, not so much. I saw barbed wires around the fences, around the schools. And then we moved out to LA, and I lived a couple blocks from Venice High School. And you know, you see the movies about high schools in LA and that sort of thing. I actually wanted to see what it was really like in Los Angeles, so I went into Venice High School. It's a scary place. The scariest place is the bathroom. You don't want to go there. Frankly, there's no toilet paper, but if you do go in there, you will find all kinds of wrong things going on. And I can't imagine sending my own kids to those schools. And if you look around, people with money didn't. They moved. They went to either private schools or they moved to better neighborhoods. The people who were left behind, well, they didn't have the money, and they're usually minority and low income. And I just didn't think that was right. That's not fair. That's not right. I remember when my daughter was born in 1999, the first question my wife and I were asking as we were driving home from school, or from church, the hospital, where are we going to send our kid to school? That's a privileged question, isn't it? Where are we going to send our kid to school? Are we going to send our kid to the school in the neighborhood that we live in? We're going to go to a private school, or is it time to move? Those are things that we had and we can do as a family. But what about the family that lives in public housing? What about the family that doesn't have that ability to move and choose other schools? So that's why I'm a big proponent of choice. And in Indiana, I don't take credit for the charter law. We had a little something to do with it because we were pushing for vouchers. But charters became the compromise in Indiana. And so in 2002, the charter law was enacted, and, well, I said, I'm tired of talking about choice. I don't know that we'll ever get vouchers in Indiana, and we can create a choice. Let's create one of these things called charter schools. And today, it's 2019. In 2002, when you're starting a charter school, especially at the very beginning of the state's history of charter schools, virtually nobody knows what they're doing. But just about everybody thinks they do. And so they're sitting, we have these things called authorizers. Have you ever authorized a school before? No, but I'm an authorizer. Okay. Then you have these people called operators. Have you ever operated a school before? No, but I've got a really good idea. And sure enough, through that little exchange, if you put together a good enough idea, you get approved. All right? You're looking at a guy that got one of the first schools approved in Indiana in 2002. Had I ever run a school? No. Had I ever taught in a school? No. What the heck am I doing proposing a school? Well, I have run businesses. And so let's figure this out. We can do better than what we're doing in Indianapolis. And so we did. We put together the first charter, we got it approved, and off we go. We had a PowerPoint presentation full of aspirations of what we were going to do. Today, in 2019, I can tell you we have made a ton of mistakes along the way. However, I have a PowerPoint presentation that is about results. It's not about ideas that might happen, it's about what's actually happening. And in 2005, so first of all, but let's go back a little bit in history. In 2002, in Indianapolis public schools, they were pretty miserable. The performance was pretty pathetic. So just about anybody that wanted to create a school could probably do a little better job than what was out there. And sure enough, we started a charter school, and we did pretty well. Our scores were good, people were looking at us, and high growth and that sort of thing. But to be honest, and I'm a very blunt and honest guy, the competition wasn't that tough. So in 2005, a group from Gary, Indiana came down to see us. And they said, oh my, we love what you're doing. We want you to come to Gary. What do you need? And I said, first and foremost, I'm not going to be a carpetbagger. I don't know anybody in Gary, Indiana. So if you want us to come, you have to form the board and you invite us. Well, sure enough, they did. They formed, it's a total Gary Indigenous board that I have, and they invited us to come to Gary to start our school. And the story I'm going to tell you about is our Gary school in Gary, Indiana. It's called 21st Century Charter School. In 2005, when we started the school, the city of Gary had a 50% dropout rate. 50%. Wow. We wanted to break that. We wanted to change that. We wanted to change that trajectory for everybody. In Gary, Indiana right now, about 1 in 10 households has any college experience in it whatsoever. So 90% of the kids that we serve in Gary, Indiana have absolutely no college in their household whatsoever. Not experience, no degrees, zip. 90%. So I have 100% poverty and 100% minority population in Gary, Indiana, and we're trying to beat this dropout factory, basically, 50% dropout rate. How are we going to do that? And how are we going to do more than just get the kids to graduate from high school, but actually go to college? And if we want them to go to college, do we want them to go to college and complete college? Because I think that's actually the goal. So how do we do that? Well, I tell you what, when we started in 2005, these are the years of, I think, years of mistakes that we made. We just went in with the same old mentality that a lot of other so-called high-performing charter schools had, college prep. Well, we're going to expose these kids to college, so we're going to give them college tours. We're going to show them how to apply for college and do the college application night. We're going to do the FAFSA night, that's the scholarship and the financial aid application, which is pretty complicated, frankly. We're going to do all that, and we're going to talk about how much you can make if you're a high school dropout over your lifetime, if you're a high school graduate over your lifetime, how much you're going to make if you're a bachelor's degree, associate degree, master's degree, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe that'll convince these kids, and these kids will now, focus on their high school work, and they'll be excited about going to college, and they'll succeed, right? No, that's not going to happen. Remember, the families that they're coming from are not experienced college or career certification program goers, okay? So when they go home, they're not talking about college. They're talking about how we're going to pay the bills, when are you going to drop out of school so that you can become a breadwinner to the family. Oh, by the way, so-and-so was just incarcerated. Oh, by the way, somebody just got shot. Oh, by the way, something else happened, negative, right? So in 2009, 2010, we were doing the same old that so-called high-performing charter schools were doing, and I wasn't happy with the results. So in 2010, we had a kid come up to me. Let's see if I can, will this work? What do I do? Okay, so this is the exterior of our school in Gary, Indiana. We built this building. This is a brand new building. But we define success by students graduating on time and going to and completing college. But to accomplish this, we must approach our school differently from traditional schools, and we do. This young man right here is named Vincent Pena. He came from a home where no college and frankly no high school graduates were living. But he's a very smart kid. And in 2010, his teachers were telling me, Vincent's going to drop out. Holy smokes. He's a sophomore in my high school, and he's going to do exactly what we set our schools up to prevent. He's going to drop out. So I went to Vincent and said, look, Vince, I hear you're smart, number one. Let's prove that you can actually do college. Let's go over to Ivy Tech Community College. They have a test. It's called the AccuPlacer. I want you to take that test. I think you're going to pass. It's a 3-part test, math, reading, and writing. And if you pass, I'm going to pay for you to go to college. His eyes lit up. I said, what? You're going to pay for me to go to college? I said, yep. So we went over. We had a deal. We went over to Ivy Tech. He took the test, and sure enough, much to his surprise, but not to mine, he passed all 3 parts of the Ivy Tech entrance exam. So in 2012, he not only graduated from high school, he became the first kid in Northwest Indiana to graduate with a full associate degree, 2 years of college paid for. First kid in Northwest Indiana history. Hello, it's 2012. That doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what happened. So what happened with Vincent, what we did with Vincent is that we changed his schedule. The adults at the building, at the school, we all changed. We had a mind shift change. It's not about, having 7 classes a day and kids being in there and taking attendance and teachers teaching and all this other stuff that we all kind of think of as schools. It's about meeting what his needs are. What do you want to do, Vincent? And Vincent, you can do college, so you're not going to be confined to this building we call a high school anymore. He actually took real college courses on the college campus. We changed our schedule to meet his needs. In other words, he left our building and he went to school at Ivy Tech Community College many times. And he would come back, obviously, but our staff also provided support all along the way. So Vincent, how you doing on that Math 101 or English 202 or robotics course that you're taking, et cetera, et cetera? We checked in with him. We helped him enroll in college. We helped him figure out his schedule in college. We paid for his textbooks in college. And we also provided transportation to go from our school to Ivy Tech Community College. Everything he could ever want and need, we gave it to him. And he was successful. Well, guess what? The next year, we had 3 more associate degree young ladies. And then we had 7 more. Then there was 3 and 6. And in our school, a lot of high schools around the country, in the gym, you'll see that they won some state basketball championship or football championship, whatever. In our gym, you'll see that our kids are celebrated for winning what we call associate degrees. And in this banner here, you actually have a student who earned a full bachelor's degree while in our high school. That's Raven Osborne right there. She was in my school. We're a K-12, by the way. She was in my school when Vincent was celebrated for earning his associate degree. We have a college signing day. Kindergartners through 12th grade, we all come into the gym. There's 900 students in the gym, families, et cetera. We're all celebrating. If you've ever watched ESPN where kids sign up, they're going to go play for U of M or Michigan State or whatever. At our school, our kids sign that they're going to college, not to play for a sport, but to actually go to the academic piece of the college. And it's celebrated. And we bring everybody in, all 900 students, into to the gym so that the young kids can see what the older kids are doing. And they probably know some of the older kids because they're brothers or sisters or they're friends of, or family members. And so we're exciting the kindergartners in seeing this. Well, Raven was in 8th grade when Vincent earned his associate degree, and she said, I'm going to do this. Her mom is single. Dad's nowhere to be found. She said, oh my, this is an opportunity for me to get free college while I'm in high school. Well, she came up to me, and I actually met her when she was a sophomore in high school. I didn't know her before then. And she came up to me and said, Mr. Teasley, I've got a problem. What's that? I've already got my associate degree, and I'm only finishing up my sophomore year of high school. And I said, that's a problem? That's not a problem. You can graduate early. You can go on to a 4-year university. She said, that's my problem. I'm only 16. I have an associate degree. I don't want to go off to a 4-year university. I'm not ready for that. Here's my challenge to you, Mr. Teasley. This is Raven saying this to me. Can I stay in your high school and take more college courses? And I had to scratch my head and I said, hold on a second here. I don't know that in all the training I've received, I've never heard this. And so I called the Department of Ed in Indiana and said, can we do this? And they've never been asked that kind of question. 2 weeks later, they called me back and said, we don't see why not. Treat her like a special ed student, teacher, treat her like a high ability student. You're meeting her needs. As long as you can count her as one of your students, you're in. So I went over to Raven, and Raven said, you're in. What school do you want to go to? Purdue. Okay. She went over to Purdue. She showed up with her college associate degree. They never asked for her high school diploma. They accepted her as a full junior at Purdue University, degree-seeking student at Purdue. And in 2017, she became the first kid I'm aware in the country to actually graduate from high school after graduating with her bachelor's degree. By the way, that bachelor's degree was fully paid for by us, 100%. Textbooks, bachelor's degree, transportation. But she will tell you, and this is the key part that I want to share with everybody here, it wasn't just Purdue, and it wasn't just her going, it was our staff that was supporting her all along the way. She will tell you that she got wobbly kneed several times and was thinking about quitting, not going on with this thing. She knew she was a trailblazer. Nobody else has done this in the country. But she did it because of the full community support that our school provided, our staff provided. We were with her all the time. So, yeah, she made a little bit of national news. CBS Evening News came to visit us. You can see that, Google it, Raven Osborne, CBS Evening News, you'll find it's been seen by about 3 million people. USA Today did a big one-page piece on her. High school kid graduates with bachelor's degree before high school. Yeah, a few people have come to see us. That's Betsy DeVos over there to the left and Mike Pence in the middle when he was our governor. And this is Mitch Daniels to the right. And that picture on the right is very important because remember I told you that Purdue didn't ask for the high school diploma when they accepted Raven. Well, Mitch had Raven come down for dinner at one of his he's president of Purdue University and now former governor. But anyway, he had Raven come down for dinner, and at a dinner like this, and he highlighted her. Said, this young lady's going to have her bachelor's degree before she graduates from high school, and it's from Purdue University. He was pretty proud. He took that picture. I didn't take that picture. He took that picture, and then he tweeted it out, and it was in Big Ten News and all that stuff. Well, when Raven went to graduate, and all this media stuff was hitting, the chancellor at Purdue University said, what do you mean you don't have your high school diploma? There's no way you can have a bachelor's degree without a high school diploma. We're not going to let you graduate. Literally, that's what his reaction was. It wasn't, let's celebrate this kid getting a bachelor's degree. By the way, she was an all-A student. It was, you can't graduate. That's an adult. Really? That's an adult's response to this success? Well, I called Mitch and I said, hey, we got a little problem here. That young lady that you celebrated, your chancellor is not going to let her graduate. Well, she wound up graduating. Mitch made sure of that. She not only got graduated, they made her go last at the ceremony, and they made a big deal. This next candidate for the bachelor's degree, you may have heard about, may have seen her on CBS Evening News, USA Today, or Fox, or whatever. Raven Osborne, first kid in the country to ever graduate from Purdue without having a bachelor's or a high school diploma. Anyway, these are more kids, 3 more, 9 more, 5 more. Now, these kids over here to the right, this was a year ago when I took this picture. The young lady to the far left with the hair up here, that's Erin Lewis, and you'll get to know her. And to the far right is her younger brother, Abram. Anyway, these 5 are inspired. Remember I told you Raven was inspired by Vince? These 5 have been inspired by Raven. And so they, too, are on what we call the bachelor degree track in our high school. How do we do it? Well, we provide transportation, and we do college orientation. Just like if anybody here has a freshman in college, they went to orientation. we take our kids to college orientation. All those red shirts are our kids at Ivy Tech Community College getting an orientation. So what here, I told you at the beginning, in 2002, we were just a PowerPoint with a bunch of aspirations. Well, in 2019, I get to tell you about some results. This kid on to the left in front of the Intel sign, that's Jeremiah Tate. He's a 2012 graduate of our school. He graduated when he was 16. Mom was incarcerated. He's from one of the worst neighborhoods in Indianapolis, and he came to our school. He's one of our originals. Graduated in 2012, went to Rose-Hulman. Some of you may know Rose-Hulman. GM likes to hire them all. But it's an engineering school, one of the top in the country, Rose-Hulman. And he went to Rose-Hulman. 4 years later, he got hired by Intel. He's out in Portland, Oregon, making six figures. Remember, I told you he's from Hawville, one of the worst neighborhoods in Indianapolis. Making six figures, living life, living the dream. Right now, he's in Italy, running around, having fun, sightseeing and touring. This young lady to the right, that's Erin Lewis. She's a junior in my high school. She's also a junior at Purdue. And having had the experience with Raven, you might think that they would say, hey, come on in, Raven. Oh, no. Erin came in, and the admissions office said, well, we've done this before, and last time we made a mistake. We didn't ask for the high school diploma. This year, we're going to ask you for the high school diploma. Well, if I give her high school diploma, which I can do, she's got an associate degree, summa cum laude, apparently, according to Ivy Tech, one of the smartest kids they've ever had. She's only 16. She wanted to go to Purdue, went over to the admissions office. Where's your high school diploma? If I give it to her, then I can't pay for her college anymore. So I called the dean and said, look, this is the same thing as we had with Raven. And the dean said, well, there's a law in Indiana. A four-year university can't accept a student in a degree track without having a high school diploma. I said, can you show me that law? Because there's a second line. Or the high school equivalent. High school diploma equivalent. So I had to go to the Higher Ed Commission, Commissioner Teresa Lovers, and actually get approval for her to allow Erin to go as a junior. She's studying biotech engineering. This young lady is just unbelievable. Well, so is her younger brother, who's in 8th grade and already taking college-level courses. To the far left, that's Jamal Abdul Rashid. He was one of our originals. He graduated in 2012 from high school with about 30 college credits. We were just getting going with the college credit thing. And 4 years later, 2016, he graduated with his bachelor's degree. 3 years later, just a couple of months ago, 2019, he earned his law degree. He's now making six figures at one of our top law firms in Indianapolis, Jamal Abdul Rashid. Almost done. Okay. Then, I'll just skip. This is just more of our alums. This last piece I want to share with you, and I'm going to wrap up with kind of rapid fire stuff. We are the red bar. In Indiana, they judge schools by college and career readiness if you're a high school. We're 100% poverty, 100% minority, and only 10% of our homes have any college in them whatsoever. So some of the best high schools in the state, you have 100%. You only have a couple of them, by the way. Carmel High School, maybe some of you have heard of Carmel. Trying to think of a comparable town. What is it? Bloomfield Hills in Detroit, that's kind of high income. Well, it's sort of your Bloomfield Hills of Indianapolis, Carmel, Indiana. Carmel is at 83.6%. There's no poverty in Carmel, Indiana. And almost every household has a college degree. Okay, that's where your doctors and lawyers are. We're right next to them at 80.5. Why is this happening? Well, I wrote this down. We have a psychological shift at our school. It's not about us, the adults, it's about the students. And believing in the students. The students can do more than we're allowing them to do as adults. They can. We're proving it every single day in Gary, Indiana. We're doing it also in Baton Rouge. One last thing I'm going to tell you. Free money is not enough. if you haven't already picked it up, when we do what we do, we don't just give the money to the kids to go to college and buy their textbooks and all that other stuff. We provide a lot of adult supervision and support all along the way. And if there are parents in the room, the one analogy I'll leave you with, if you were ever a parent and you taught your kid how to swim, you didn't, I hope you didn't, just take your kid and throw them in the deep end and say, swim. But that's what we expect with our kids when we send them to college. Swim without any experience. They're getting experience, our kids are getting experience, and they're coming out successful. Thank you.
We have time for just a couple of rapid-fire questions. These are great presentations, and there's a lot of good questions here. I would encourage you, I hope our guests can stay around for a few minutes if we, after our formal program to answer, but I'll throw out a couple here. Dr. Weatherspoon, what can school districts do? What kind of steps can they take on the front end to avoid the train wreck that negatively impacts our students? Rapid fire.
Pay attention to your staffing, your market share. In one of the pages in the handout, if you've got more than 10 or 25% of your kids leaving your school district, you need to change what you're doing immediately. Secondly, if you don't maintain a fund equity, a balance of over 10 to 15, between 10 and 15%, you're locked in for the train wreck.
Another rapid fire for either one of you. What role do you feel preschool plays in a child's academic success? How does Head Start help or hurt a struggling preschooler in their readiness for kindergarten? Rapid fire.
Oh, I think any schooling is important, so preschool would be great. Don't know if it needs to be mandatory, but it'd be great if we could provide it.
The last one here. The current funding mechanisms that support the current funding mechanisms support the concept that school is a place to put children. What would a funding system that supports learning look like? That's a huge question. Maybe you have a quick thought on that line.
I think we're doing that at 21st Century. The money doesn't stay in our building. It goes with the kid. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the kid. And we try to help the kid make the most out of every single dollar. You have on your table a flyer or a one-page thing, and it talks about how we take the state money. Every dollar that we're spending on these kids going to college is state money. It's not new money. It's not philanthropic money. I don't spend any time raising money. I'm taking advantage of the per pupil dollar that we get from the state of Indiana, and we're stretching it, and we're not only getting K-12 education, we're getting K-14, and in certain circumstances, we're getting K-16 results. So the taxpayers are getting a good bang for their buck.
This has been the start of a great conversation today about turning around underperforming schools, just the beginning of a long conversation, actually the middle of a long conversation. Let's give a round of applause to our speakers.
Thank you.
Before we go, a couple final announcements. First of all, we'd like to thank our sponsor of today's Issues and Ideas Forum, Auto Owners Insurance. It would not be possible to make this happen without them, so we want to extend our appreciation to them. A couple things you find on your table. You're invited to a screening of this film, feature film, Miss Virginia. Information on that's next Wednesday evening. I'm looking forward to watching this myself. And Opportunity Michigan, it's a new network initiative of the Mackinac Center. Find out more on it, how you can get connected and more involved that way. So once again, we want to thank Dr. Weatherspoon, Mr. Teasley, and please, if you get a chance, stay around and talk with them. Thank you so much for coming today.
All right. You're involved in